She was just going about her day, tending to the farm, unaware that danger was closing in. They saw her as a target, mocking her with cruel words and a twisted game. But what they didn't know, her husband wasn't just a farmer. He was trained to hunt men like them. He had been a captain, an athlete, a fighter, and now he was coming for them. Would he make it in time? Or would this day end in tragedy? Stay tuned to find out what happens next. Sarah had always found solace in the rhythm of farm life. The quiet mornings, the soft rustling of the wind through the fields, and the distant call of birds. Everything felt peaceful, safe. She had moved here years ago, leaving behind the noise of the city to settle into a life that was simple yet fulfilling. Her husband, Jim, a man of few words but immense strength, had been her anchor. A former athlete, he had led a disciplined life, always focused on the future, always protecting what mattered most. Together, they had built a life full of purpose, working side by side on the land. This particular day had started like any other. The sun was just rising over the horizon, casting a golden glow across the fields. Sarah had risen early, as always, to tend to the animals. Jim, who had already been up for a run to stay in shape, came back with a smile on his face, ready for another day of work. They exchanged a brief, knowing glance, the kind of look that said everything without words. Life was good, simple, and predictable. But that morning, something felt different. As Sarah worked near the barn, she noticed a truck creeping slowly down the road. She didn't think much of it at first. People passed by all the time. But there was something unsettling about the way the truck lingered. Her unease grew as it came to a stop at the end of their dirt driveway. Sarah paused, wiping her brow, her instincts telling her that something wasn't quite right. The truck's engine hummed as two men stepped out, their eyes fixed on her. Her heart skipped a beat. These were men she didn't recognize, strangers. But there was no time to think. The truck's engine revved again, and before Sarah could react, they approached her, their presence unnerving and their intent unclear. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening, but she could feel the danger closing in. The two men smiled at her, one of them calling out, "Hey, beautiful white girl, let's play a game." Sarah's stomach turned as they stepped closer, the cruel mockery in their words sending a chill down her spine. They had plans for her, plans that didn't include any chance of escape. But what they didn't know was that Jim was close by, and he wasn't about to let anything happen to her. As they grabbed Sarah and shoved her toward the truck, a storm was brewing in the distance. And it wasn't just the weather. It was Jim's fury, and it was coming for them all. Would Jim get there in time? Would he save Sarah from the nightmare that was unfolding before her? The day's peacefulness was shattered, and nothing would ever be the same again. Before we continue with the next part of this powerful story, we need your support to help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. We believe in sharing these impactful stories, but we can't do it without you. If you're enjoying this journey, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button. It means the world to us. Collision. Also, don't forget to like the video, leave a comment, and tell us where you're watching from. Has something like this ever happened to you? How did you handle it? We want to hear your experiences and start a conversation that matters. Your voice is important, and sharing your story could inspire others. And don't miss the last part of this story. It has a special twist just for you. Stay tuned for a revelation you won't want to miss. Now, let's dive back into the story, and remember, together, we can make a difference. Raising hands. The truck's tires kicked up dust as the men dragged Sarah toward it. Fear surged through her body, but she tried to stay calm. Her thoughts raced. Where was Jim? She had heard the truck, but there was no sign of him. Maybe he was still out in the fields, or perhaps he had gone into town. Either way, she knew she was alone, at least for now. The men grinned as they shoved her into the back of the truck. One of them laughed darkly. "You're going to have so much fun with us, sweetheart. This is your test. We've had our fun with the black ones. Now it's time for the white girl to play." Sarah's stomach twisted, the words cutting deeper than any physical pain ever could. They hadn't even tried to hide their hate, their intentions so clear it made her blood run cold. The truck jolted forward, and Sarah barely had time to react. She tried to brace herself, her hands gripping the metal of the truck's side, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't think straight, couldn't focus. All she could think about was Jim, and the horrible realization that she might never see him again. The landscape flew by in a blur as they drove deeper into the woods. She thought about screaming, but she knew it would be useless. There was no one around for miles, no one who could hear her. She had to think of a way out, but her mind kept returning to Jim. He was strong. He was trained. She prayed he was on his way, that he was coming for her. But the further they drove, the less hope she felt. Minutes felt like hours, and just as Sarah was about to lose all hope, the truck came to a sudden halt. The men climbed out and opened the back of the truck. "Time for you to meet your fate, darling." One of them sneered. He grabbed her arm, pulling her toward an abandoned cabin. She stumbled, trying to free herself, but the grip was too tight. Just as Sarah was being dragged toward the cabin, a sudden noise caught the men's attention. The sound of footsteps, heavy and purposeful, breaking through the silence of the woods. Sarah froze, her heart leaping into her throat. She recognized those footsteps. It was Jim. The men were distracted for a moment, looking around, but they didn't see him yet. Sarah's heart raced. He was here. He had come for her. The sirens grew louder, and for a moment, Jim's heart sank. The authorities had been called, and there was no way of knowing whether the police would be on their side or not. The idea of being arrested for defending his wife was a horrifying thought, but there was no time to think about that. They had to move fast. Jim grabbed Sarah's hand, pulling her toward the woods. He knew the area well. He had spent years running through these forests, and he knew every path, every shortcut. As they ran, the adrenaline surged through him, pushing him to move faster, harder, as though the world itself was closing in around them. Behind them, the men were getting to their feet, and they were not alone. More were coming. Jim had to act quickly. He could feel the heat of their breath on his neck, hear the pounding of their boots on the ground. But he wasn't going to stop. Not now. Not when he was so close to getting Sarah to safety. As they reached a clearing, Jim saw it. The old shack, the one where he and Sarah had spent their first few days together when they had moved here. It was small, hidden away, the perfect place to hide. He pushed Sarah inside and slammed the door shut behind them. They were safe for now. But as they huddled together in the darkness, they both knew this wasn't over. They had won this round, but the war wasn't finished. The question loomed in the air. Would they make it out of this alive? Or was this just the beginning of something much darker? The silence inside the shack was deafening. Jim and Sarah huddled together, their breath slow and heavy as they listened for any sounds of movement outside. The adrenaline from the fight had begun to wear off, and now it was replaced by an overwhelming exhaustion. But in the midst of it all, there was a sense of relief. At least for now, they were safe. As the night dragged on, the weight of what had happened began to sink in. Jim held Sarah close, his heart still racing from the earlier confrontation. She rested her head on his shoulder, tears silently streaming down her face. The reality of the situation was starting to hit her. They had narrowly escaped death. It wasn't just about the physical violence. It was about the cruelty, the hate that had driven those men to do what they did. And the worst part? It wasn't an isolated incident. This kind of hatred was everywhere, in places they couldn't even see. But in this moment, Jim was right there with her, and they had survived. "Thank God you're here," Sarah whispered, her voice barely a breath. Jim didn't answer at first, still too shaken to speak. But when he finally did, his voice was thick with emotion. "We were lucky, but I'm not going to let it happen again. This has to change." That was the moment when everything shifted. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about standing up, not just for themselves, but for everyone who had ever faced the kind of hatred they had just escaped. It was about fighting for a world where people didn't have to fear the color of their skin or the place they called home. Jim had spent years training for battles, but this fight, the one for justice, for equality, for respect, was the most important one of all. They knew that this was only one story, one fight in a long, long battle, but it was a fight worth fighting. And now, more than ever, they were ready for whatever came next. Thank you so much for watching this powerful story. We hope it made you reflect, and we hope it moved you. But this story isn't just about one couple. It's about millions of people who face racial injustice every day. It's about the need for change, for action, and for standing together. We have to ask ourselves, how many more stories like this will it take before we finally start to listen? If you believe in the power of stories to spark change, please hit that subscribe button and join our community. Every time you like, share, or comment, you're helping these important stories reach more people. And that's how change begins. Together, we can make a difference. And don't forget, stay tuned for more stories that matter. Stories that will open your eyes, touch your heart, and inspire you to act. Thank you for being a part of this movement. See you in the next video.